The thing that probably pushed me more than anything was when I had made a decision to do something and someone tells me, you can't do that, or that's not going to work. You know, that to me was probably more of a springboard to go, okay, I'm going to do this. When I started taking certain levels of leadership roles, I met that with a lot of resistance and pushback. I went in blind. I'll tell you right straight out, I didn't know squat about dentistry. I was lucky more than anything that my personality and the things that I did meshed so beautifully with what dentistry is all about. In dental school, I saw that. I felt very uncomfortable cutting the preparations that I had to cut to be able to pass my classes. You're looked upon all the time as kind of on the fringe because you're doing things that most people just don't do. And when I saw the crowns and what they would do, it made me sick to think about the structural integrity of a tooth being destroyed by putting a crown on it. You know, we shouldn't take any of the training that we get as gospel. That's being a follower. Every lecture I ever had, I had some colleagues pushing back. I had pushback saying I'm nuts. The first leadership roles I can remember was probably more involved with my brothers. We, as a family, I was a middle child, and I would guess my older brother didn't step up to the plate, so I managed to step up a little more than him, and I realized that my family had no real collegiate training of any sort, and it was just kind of expected that you were going to do a blue-collar job and work your way through life. And I knew early on that I was not going to settle for that. So I started taking classes and courses that I felt were fun and educational and would lead to me being able to take whatever direction that I really wanted to in life. I mean, early on I was talking medical terminology, and I was always fascinated by medicine, and that ultimately ended up being the direction I went. And at some point in time, I had some experiences where I realized that medicine might not be the best avenue for me to go, but dentistry fit perfectly with the types of things that I had trained on and what interested me, because it was kind of the perfect blend of art and science. We literally would call each other, hey, I saw a patient today. That's how bad it was. When I started taking certain levels of leadership roles, I met that with a lot of resistance and pushback from family members because they felt I was being a smart ass. I'll use that term. I was, you know, they felt, I believe, I guess I can't say what somebody feels, but the information that I was getting as feedback was probably more that I was being a brainiac and looking down on them, and I never did at any point in my life that I ever felt like I was doing that. I just liked information, and I would disseminate it, and when things happened, I always stepped up to make sure that things got done well. And I guess that's probably the earliest leadership roles that I ended up that I remember. When you get pushback from taking a leadership role, sometimes it depends on who was given the pushback. You know, if it was a family member, it was something that I probably backed off more. If it was friends or people, I guess I didn't care as much that they had their opinion of what I was doing, as I did for my own family members. I moved from northern Minnesota to southern Minnesota when I was between, we didn't have middle school at the time, but between grade school and junior high. So I started into a brand new school in a new town in the 7th grade. So I had kind of a blank slate to do whatever I wanted with my life. And I sought out good friends, and still have a number of them that I communicate with on a regular basis at that, that I met at that school. Got involved with sports, and my level of sports was in swimming and diving, and I was fairly accomplished at virtually any of the sports that I was at, but I was a little guy. I was small, and that made things even more difficult taking on leadership roles because I was not a very large person. I graduated from high school. I was 145 pounds and 5'9", I guess, and I grew after that. And so that made it a little difficult to take on some of those leadership roles. I was considered a pipsqueak at that point in time, so I don't know how that bears out. I just felt that I was, very accomplished at what I had done. I was proud of the grades I was getting. I did very well in school. I was, academically did very well in high school and had good friends and good times. I look back at it as being some of the moments in time that I really enjoyed. It's funny we're talking about schools having specialized programs and things along those lines, because we did not have any specialized programs. But I had taken everything that I could within the realms of science and art and whatnot, that I could not take any more classes. So finished all the classes that I could up to the level of having all my biologies and the sciences and even English and what else did I have in it? Oh, art. And I had taken the classes that I could take, but I wanted to do more, so I approached the school and the teachers and said, look, there's got to be something more that I can do. And so consequently, they set up independent study classes for me. So in my senior year, I literally had senior social studies, and I don't even remember what other course. I had 2 courses I needed to be in school for, and the rest of the time I had independent study classes. At that time, there were no other students who were doing what I was doing. They set something up specifically for me to be able to keep me busy doing the stuff that interested me. Asking for that type of a program, I don't even know how. Apparently they'd opened up some avenues for people to be able to do this independent study stuff, and to this day, I don't know of any other classmates that did it. Like I charted all the flora and fauna in a specific scientific study park that they had. It was groundbreaking for the school to have something like that happen. My friends were envious that I had a pass to leave the school at any point in time that I was not in class, and that I could go over to, it was Kaplan's Woods was the name of the area, and I could go over to Kaplan's Woods, and that I could basically not be at the school. My art independent study, I spent with the art instructor generally an hour a day type thing, and we would, do jewelry, we would do castings, we would do, I had done lost wax technique in high school, and so dental school, it was no big deal to be able to wax things up and do the castings that we did in dental school, and a lot of the stuff I did was ceramics and working on a potter's wheel or doing hand forming of ceramics to try to push the limits of what you could do with kiln firing things. I mean, I created this huge piece that was connected piece to piece to piece with hollow tubes, and the instructor said there was no way on God's green earth that she could fire that without it blowing up. And I said that I firmly believe I have it vented appropriately, that it would survive, and so we ran it through the firing and glazing process, and it survived. And it's a doorstop at now. It was for a while.
One instructor or a different instructor?
That was one instructor in the art
With all
class.
these different disciplines in that.
Independent study. There were 4 different instructors that I had. I had an English instructor.
Yeah, but in the art department, there was one instructor.
No, the art department had 4 instructors, but I chose the one that I had bonded with this instructor early on, and she was a fantastic teacher, and we just hit it off. And in fact, literally, I would guess a year ago, I contacted her. She lives down in Florida, and I just wanted to thank her for setting me up for success in life. That she was part of that, and it's.
What did she say about that in retrospect?
She was flabbergasted that someone would contact her and talk about what she had done for them, because she was a young teacher. She was only like 25 years old or something like that, and was just, was excited about art, and it excited me, to the point that when I went to dental school, or when I went to college, they did not have advanced placement in college at that point in time. And what they had was a college level examination program, and that CLEP that you could take, you could get credits. And I believe I got somewhere just shy of 30 credits just for taking a test, because as you virtually tested out of freshman English. I had art credits that went in. I had, so ultimately it saved me money going through college, and I got through quicker than I probably could have gotten through.
So you hit the ground running.
So yes, at that point in time, I hit the ground running.
Any specific things that stand out in the college program that you took?
Well, any specific things that stood out in my college program, I would have to say, and just clarify some things. I literally went off to college. How do I put this? My parents moved from southern Minnesota when I graduated my senior year. January of my senior year, they moved to northern Minnesota for my dad's job. They left me and my brother to finish, me for high school and my brother for tech school. And they left us in the house, and then the new owners were moving in at the end of May. So I lived from January till May in a house, literally with lawn chairs and a picnic table and a small little 12-inch TV set, and was on my own at that point. And then I got a job at a.
They didn't give a crap about you, or they thought you had quite a bit of responsibility to be able to tolerate that.
My parents knew I was responsible, so they had no. I don't think they had any problem with me being down there alone. We had neighbors that knew us very well, so that they knew we were going to be watched over, but. It was one of those things. I ended up getting a job with the state of Minnesota and worked as a lifeguard and worked at a state park and lived at the state park. So once we moved out of the house, I had a place to live at the state park, and I lived there all summer long, and then I went off to college.
And your parents were non-college people. What did they think about you taking that particular direction?
You know, my parents didn't go to college. My mother never graduated from high school. My dad graduated from high school. And so they were comfortable with whether or not I wanted to go to tech school, or if I wanted to go to college, or if I didn't want to go at all to school. They were comfortable with whatever, you know, my decision was. I had always talked about college, so they knew I was interested in it. And consequently, you know, that's where I headed off to college. And I literally went 2 quarters, and I got the first C I ever had in my life when I was in school. And I literally, I mean, it was a time where I look back at it and I should never have made the decision I made, but there were some good things that came out of it, but I quit. I was done. I was not going to go to college. I went and found a job. A friend of mine who was working in a mobile home factory, and I went and took this job at the mobile home factory, and I was in the department that is called Final Finish. So I was the guy that when the mobile homes came up, I had to straighten the walls, I had to put in all the final finish, the curtains, the refrigerator, freezer, washer, dryer, hook up the stoves, hook up the furnaces, things on that level. And I was, ended up, I mean, this is an interesting story from the perspective of being very forward, but I realized that we were paid on an incentive program, so we got paid once the coach moved up the line. Well, when it got dumped on Final Finish, I was the one fixing everybody's screw-ups. And I wasn't happy with the QC coming up, and I went to the plant manager and I said, the guy's name was Bob Britton, nicest guy in the world. And I said, Bob, you know, I'm making the same amount as everybody else in this plant, and everybody else is out by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm here till 7 o'clock at night, and I'm coming in on Saturdays to get these coaches cleaned up so we can ship them down the line. I said, when the floor department pushes the coach up to us, I said, I'm going to punch out, and then I'll punch back in, and then you're going to pay me hourly for what I'm doing to fix the screw-ups that are coming up this line. And he looked at me and he goes, you know what, you're absolutely right. And so I became the highest paid. I was 18 years old at that time, and I was the highest paid employee outside of management in that plant. And I worked for the summer, and it was a boring job. It was something I was not having fun doing, and I found myself messing with some of the employees that were there from the perspective of one guy was a hothead, and I mean, this is just bad behavior, but I would literally, you know, move a stool that he had left someplace, you know, to get it out of my way, quote, out of my way, and then he'd flash, and one day he literally picked up one of those stools, and he threw it out the coach as one of my coworkers was walking in and split him up right. I mean, he gashed him massively. He was bleeding all over the place, and I went, you know what, that's my fault. Absolutely my fault. I'm the one that was screwing with this guy. And I just said, you know what, I got to do something with my life. And so I went to the plant manager, and he goes, Mark, he goes, we don't want to lose you. We want you to stay here. Tell you what, I will make you the Midwestern Regional, he had some title that he did. And I looked at him and I said, Bob, so what I'm hearing you say is that I'm going to get to take that utility truck out there, that dilapidated old utility truck out there, and drive out to Gillette, Wyoming and Sheridan, Wyoming, and fix the screw-ups that are coming off the assembly line. And he looked at me and he started laughing. And he goes, Mark, he said, whatever you do, he said, you're going to do well at it. I am going to miss you so much. And he goes, well, how long do we have you? And I said, I'm going back to school. And that's where I decided that I was going to do something with my life. And I mean, that was one of the precipitating episodes that really made me look inward and decide that I had to do something more with my life.
And how long had it been since you dropped out to that point?
I dropped out in, I guess it would be February or March, and that was by July. Okay. I worked, you know, that period of time, and then I went back, and I actually went back to a community college. I had some friends who were playing football over there, and I went and roomed with them and started taking classes trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And it ended up being one of the best things for me because I had a couple of jobs this was in Rochester, Minnesota, and did more lifeguarding, and also worked at the school, and I had certain responsibilities, and they gave more of them to me as we went along, working in the student center. And I just, you know, it was a good experience because I was able to learn. I took my core sciences, I took my organic chemistry. I scored the highest on my DATs in organic chemistry, and I took organic chemistry, the dental admissions test. So, you know, when I finally decided the direction that I wanted to go into dental school, I realized that the education that I received at that community college was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. I scored higher in those areas of that DAT than I did, you know, with the stuff that I had at a four-year major college.
And how did you happen to pick dentistry? I didn't quite get that.
The choice to go to dental school, was a decision that I made after I had already made the decision that I was going to go to medical school. I had plans on going to medical school, and then it was my girlfriend at the time's brother was, and it's my wife now, but her brother was graduating from medical school, and we were out for dinner, and he was talking about patients, you know, treatments and patients dying and things along that line. And I realized there is no way on God's green earth this person could deal with death and dying. And I've always been a tinkerer with, you know, working on engines, building things. The art was fun for me. The art was a big thing for me. And science was a given. I did all kinds of, you know, the biologies and chemistries and physics. I enjoyed all of them. So dentistry seemed to be the natural fit. And a friend of mine who I used to deliver groceries with and work in a grocery store had graduated from dental school and set up a practice, and I needed some wisdom teeth out, so I went to see Kirby. And Kirby and I had a long conversation and had dinner. That I got intrigued by what he did and how he, you know, was doing in dentistry. And so that's where I started going that direction. I went in blind. I'll tell you right straight out, I didn't know squat about dentistry. I was lucky more than anything that my personality and the things that I did meshed so beautifully with what dentistry is all about. And it made dental school fairly easy for me because I had the hand-eye coordination, the skills. I could get things done fairly quickly, and I had three-dimensional abilities that were beyond most of my classmates. I did well, even though I was working 2+ jobs all the while I was in dental school. When I was in dental school, I saw, you know, we were learning literally, it was kind of at the end of the G.V. Black extension for prevention type of dentistry. Basically, anytime that you had a pit or groove in a tooth, if it had discoloration in it, you just took your burr and ran it up the groove and cleaned it out and then put your amalgam in there. And I looked at that as an unbelievable waste of good tooth structure for us to do that, and that structurally it was going to compromise the tooth. In dental school, I saw that. I felt very uncomfortable cutting the preparations that I had to cut to be able to pass my classes. It probably comes from just merging everything together of what I had done in life and worked on. And you know, I don't have an engineering degree, but I understand engineering principles very well. And it just didn't jibe. What we were doing seemed absolutely wrong to me. I think a person has to draw upon past experiences all the time and take a look at how you can make things better, do things better, help people better, and consequently you're looked upon all the time as kind of on the fringe because you're doing things that most people just don't do. And I have done that most of my career. I mean, even venturing into utilizing not only the minimal preparations, I thought I was doing minimal invasive dentistry, and then I went to a conference where they were introducing air abrasion. And at that conference, air abrasion, just to clarify, air abrasion is you're accelerating with air pressure particles against a tooth to allow it to cavitate or prepare the tooth. Okay? You can use it focused and really blast out tooth structure, or you can defocus it and create textures on the surface so you can get better bonds. Anyways, I thought my minimal preparations were minimal invasive dentistry. It was about 10 years after dental school. And I went to a conference that was basically supported by a company that was selling air abrasion units, and I ran into, you know, what I consider one of my mentors, Tim Rainey, at that meeting, and he was intrigued by the way that I was treating teeth that were previously destroyed by extension for prevention dentistry and not going to crowns but going to onlays, trying to do things in a single appointment with you know, I was using some materials and techniques to create crowns / short-walled crowns, onlays, and bond them in the same day. The question was, who told you to do that? And nobody told me to do it. I just felt that, I don't even know how to explain this. The way dentistry was being done was either you did a small filling or you did a crown. And when I saw the crowns and what they would do, it made me sick to think about the structural integrity of a tooth being destroyed by putting a crown around. You took the tooth and you literally reduced the entire periphery of the tooth and you shortened it down so that there was not much tooth structure left. And then people never even thought about inside the tooth is this hollow space that's filled with soft tissue, and it's called the nerve and the pulp chamber inside the tooth. And so you have this large pulp chamber inside, you've got this thin area of tooth structure outside, and then you put a thimble over the top of the tooth in the form of a crown to hold everything together. Well, when you start reducing that much tooth structure, you start making that soft tissue on the inside of the tooth angry. And a lot of people ended up with root canals, and that crown preparation that, you know, you have certain parameters with the materials that you're using that you have to remove a certain amount of tooth structure. And when you do that, it can make the nerve angry inside the tooth. So I decided I was going to start making short-walled crowns. And when I graduated from dental school, I literally waxed up my own gold crowns and cast them. Interest rates were 22.5%. I was one of 2 people in a class of 150 that said, you know what, I don't care. I'm going to have my own practice. I, for whatever reason, headstrong, bullheaded, whatever you want to say, I decided that I was not going to work for somebody. We literally would call each other, hey, I saw a patient today. That's how bad it was. Corporate dentistry to me is not the direction for someone like myself to go. I realize there's a place in this world for corporate dentistry. It's just not for me or people that are like me. You just can't be a worker bee. I firmly believe there's plenty of room for people like me. If someone has the entrepreneurial spirit, they can go out and make it work. No ifs, ands, or buts. And there are a lot of doctors that have decent practices they really can't sell. So young dentists can go out and they can find places. It may not be in the exact place they want to practice, but they can go out and get their feet wet and make a living and debt service what they have, and eventually they can make changes however they want to, or they settle into a community where they can feel comfortable and part of that community. When I set up my practice, I always had, like I've said, this minimal invasive thought process. And for me, I do full mouth reconstructions at times, and there are reasons that you have to do full mouth reconstructions. But it always bothers me to pick up a burr and spin down a tooth to be able to get either aesthetics or function. You know, function doesn't bother me as much as aesthetics. Even though I do it, I've got some beautiful cases that we've done for people to give them beautiful smiles and revitalize their mouths. But what jazzes me more than anything is trying to save tooth structure. You know, to me, a full mouth reconstruction could be a whole pile of fillings and making sure that the bite is stable and they've got a decent looking smile with plastics. You know, consider myself a plastic surgeon. I use a lot of plastics, the composites, to build people's teeth, and it can last for a long period of time, done very, very well. I can show cases that are 35, 40 years old that the fillings look almost as like I put them in yesterday. I mean, I've tested shrinkage. I've literally sectioned teeth. When I did my tests early on, I took a tooth that I literally plucked out of the mouth and I sectioned it underwater, and then I did my curing studies to see how far I could move light through a tooth to polymerize composites deep within the tooth. And I could polymerize over halfway through a molar tooth utilizing actually a fairly weak light compared to what we're utilizing nowadays. You know, we shouldn't take any of the training that we get as gospel. That's being a follower. I wanted to make sure that what I was doing was going to work for patients. And so, yeah, you can't take any education as gospel. You need to study it. And case in point, when I first learned about ozone, I thought it was the most bizarre thing that they were pushing. And the more I studied it, the more I learned about it, the more I became enamored by what it could do. And then I ultimately started to venture out on personal health things to test it on myself. And all of a sudden I was seeing great results with, you know, keeping colds and flus and healing them when you got sick, and wounds, wound healing. I mean, I was like, how come we're not using ozone for everything? I mean, that's the point I got to. And then I found out there was just a huge library of information about the use of ozone. And so I started using it probably 15 years ago in my practice. I felt at that point in time that I knew enough about it that I could go out and start educating on minimal invasive dentistry and, you know, having kind of the main core of it be bulk filling. Every lecture I ever had, I had some colleagues pushing back because they felt uncomfortable with what I was doing. And I just invited them to go out and study it and learn more about it. We all have the capacity to make our own decisions in life, and we have to follow good core sciences with what we do. Other avenues that I started teaching on, ozone, matrixing, you know, being able to, so in order to create a tooth, you need to somehow limit where your filling materials are going to go. So you use a matrix to create, it's a cement form. You know, if you're making a sidewalk and you want the sidewalk to zig through your yard, you have to make a cement form and then fill it with cement. That became part of the teaching process because the only way that you could do the bulk fill appropriately was to allow light to get to all aspects of the filling that you were doing. I didn't market minimally invasive dentistry until it was probably 15 years ago. I always talked about it in the practice early on about saving tooth structure, but I never really marketed it because I didn't see it as being a viable market at that point in time. But things have changed in society, and consequently people are getting more health conscious and more aware, and I finally decided that it was time to let the cat out of the bag. For me, minimal invasive dentistry is, we should be respecting the tooth. Every bit of tooth structure that we can save, we should try to save. The more that you remove from that tooth, the closer you're getting to the end of life for that tooth. You know, over the years, I've had the opportunity to watch my dentistry survive. I've been in the same place for 42 years, and I have patients that have been with me for 42 years. And consequently, I get to see them on a regular basis, and I get to see my dentistry. And some of it that I put in 42 years ago is still there. If I would have followed the principles that I was taught in dental school, a significant number of these patients would be missing more teeth, they would have more crowns in their mouth, they would have more root canals. Consequently, this whole minimal invasive thought process saves not only tooth structure, it saves nerves and saves teeth from being fractured. If I had pushback saying I'm nuts, you know what? No one's ever told me that. I've had, I would guess in circles out there are people going, that Malterude's kind of a crazy dude, he does this stuff. And I've had people sent to me because they wanted to have more conservative dentistry done, and the doctors are like, well, that's not what I do. And they send them over to me. It's interesting, when you do some lecturing, you always have some naysayer in the audience. And the only place that I've ever really been challenged heavily was, it was at the one Greater New York meeting, and another one was in New York State. And it was both metropolitan dentists, and I had people come up to me afterwards and said, that guy's a blowhard, he does this to everybody, and then he just wants to prove that he knows more than other people. I would say that the types of dentistry that I do, back when I was doing it, would never have passed board exams. I've never had something come to me from the board. I've never had a patient turn me into the board. I've never had got invited to lecture for the AGD early on.
What's the
And
AGD?
so the Academy of General Dentistry is a consortium of, it's probably about 35 to 40,000 dentists that are general dentists, and it's kind of the governing body of general dentistry at this point in time. Anyways, I had lectured for them, and I got involved in their mastership program and in their fellowship programs, and decided that it was a good group to belong to. And there was a call for leadership roles, and they were doing a strategic planning, and they asked me to come join them for a strategic planning session in Chicago. And so I went down there, and I got to see the people and how they interacted, and there were just a good bunch of people that were there. And when I was at that meeting, the president of the organization asked me, if I was interested in getting involved more with the Academy, and he said, would you want to go on one of our councils or committees? And I told him that I was, probably the only thing that I was really interested in was their dental education council. Well, apparently it's the council that people want to get on, and I was at the meeting, people were like, there's no way that you can get on that without getting involved with the Academy. Well, I got invited and ended up in that leadership role. So I was on the Dental Education Council. I mean, we literally, every aspect of education was under our purview. And so I ended up on that Dental Education Council, and within 3 years I was the chair of that council, and that moved me through other leadership roles, and I got asked to be on special task forces and things from that perspective. So just getting involved early on with the Academy of General Dentistry led me into other leadership roles. I didn't say no to the Academy because I felt they had a very good direction, and they were helping people become better dentists. And consequently, I felt that what I was doing with the Academy would actually make dentistry and what people received from the dentists better. All these roles are volunteer. So whether I did it locally, because I got involved with the state of Minnesota's AGD program and was president there for a number of years and kept it running, and then moved on to national. I guess before I went and did the Dental Education Council, I was working with an education group here in Minnesota that was tied to the Academy of General Dentistry. So I did have some ties there, and I stepped up and took on a leadership role there as a president for this area also. And it's led to many other areas of where I've been asked in industry to do things with companies, or it's actually opened up some lecturing opportunities for me also, because people get to know you and are interested in what you're talking about. Educational groups that I've been involved with, Catapult and Rare Birds is a new one that I'm working with, and these groups are designed kind of as a feeder for people to find lectures and lecture, the state meetings and local groups. Seek out these groups like Catapult, and there are others that are out there. But I do product testing. So that has been nice because it connects you with industry, and you get to test sometimes prototypes, sometimes it's early, beta testing. I got involved with a group a little over 10 years ago called Smile Source. I was realizing that corporate dentistry was coming on strong, and I also realized that I could not be a member of a company that the only thing they looked at was bottom line.
So what is corporate dentistry?
So corporate dentistry is the dentist loses, and maybe this is my issue, I don't like losing control of situations. And frankly, when you become a part of a corporate environment, you oftentimes have to give, and most of the time I would say, have to give up the control that you have, and you have to follow corporate edicts. So if they say you're going to use this material, then you use this material. And if they say you're going to do these procedures in your office, either you do those procedures or they'll find somebody that can do those procedures. And that does not fit with my personality. Lots of worker bees out there that want to do dentistry, but don't want to take on the responsibilities or leadership roles that it takes to be a private owner or in private industry. Check on SmileSource. If you're passionate about independent practice of dentistry, there's not a better group of independent-minded, independent practicing dentists I would say in the world. SmileSource not only supports the private practice of dentistry, but they provide us with education. SmileSource is not about anybody controlling a person's practice. The dentists themselves choose how they want to practice, where they want to practice, what they want to do in their practice. It's all independent practice. The support that comes from SmileSource is not only membership, member to member, but it's also feeding down information from larger groups to the members, and the educational aspect. And then there's the kind of the foundation of it. As a corporation, corporations are able to negotiate contracts with larger, the retail people or the groups that are selling you dental supplies, and they can buy at a significantly reduced rate. I have 2 kids and 4 grandchildren, and I would guess that you have to learn leadership skills to be able to have kids that are, they're doing fantastic in life. My daughter's a dentist. My son works for the Corps of Engineers and is high up the ladder in that group and does very well. He actually now is running leadership programs for the Corps of Engineers. In this day and age, there are a lot of kids that just settle and they don't try to excel. And I think that's probably the gist of what has kept me vital and moving forward and moving towards leadership and lecturing and mentoring, is that I just frankly don't want to settle. I want to always do better. Most of it is internal, and I have no idea, for me to have that drive to always be doing better and learning and helping other people. I can't say that there was anyone in my immediate family that ever took those roles or taught those roles to me. If someone told me that I couldn't do it, I was going to prove that I could. Family wasn't the nidus of the leadership roles. It was people that I had run into, and they just were welcoming to me. That they were welcoming, and they were also encouraging to the point where they said, we could use you as we need someone like you in our organization to help us move forward. And that was enough to really make me go, you know what, I can make a difference. I can help other people in those realms. So, I take little bits and pieces from each and every person that I've met. Some are very humble, some are very brash with what they do, and there's a place for humbleness and there's a place for brashness. There's innate abilities that people have that we need to be able to recognize. And once you recognize that, and I think there's innate abilities in each and every child out there. You have to identify them. But to get to where I'm at in life, you have to have a passion for people. You have to have the desire to help people in their lives. Ultimately, dentistry is about people. And I think even life is about people. You need to help them. The technical stuff gets me the ability to help people at a higher level. That's why I spend the time on the technical aspect of things, so that when I am able to help somebody, my goal is to help them at a higher level than the average Joe out there. So I've been asked some very poignant questions here, and it makes me reflect back on my life. But I think what's been accomplished in my life, I feel very good about. And obviously, if we could change things, we could change a number of things in our lives. But my life has gone pretty dang well for where I'm at in it. I'll never be a rich dentist, as they say. I spend more money on education and tinkering with new toys and things along those lines. I care about, doing the best dentistry that I possibly can. I do get to see the results every day. I mean, when patients come in, the comments that we get and the hugs, and I mean, there's nothing better than having patients just thank you profusely and give you a hug or a strong handshake and thank you for what you've done to help them. It used to be that dentistry was literally this area of the head and neck, and that's what was our area to work in, and we drill, filled, and build. And, we chased disease process in the patient's mouth. Now, we realize the impact that we have on the rest of the body. What's in this mouth has an effect on the entire systemic health, and to a point where I firmly believe that dentistry is the gatekeeper for overall health of our general population. And those systemic effects can be very detrimental, or we can convert them and get people healthier, and we can make them systemically healthy by cleaning up their mouth. I have been married for 47 years. I've known my wife for 48. We got married literally a year and 2 months after we met. And she has been the most supportive partner that I could ever ask for. But we always stay connected, and I try to incorporate her in a lot of what we do, and what I do, I should say. But we always take trips together, and she's been a fantastic mother and wife, and she's a wonderful person. I can't say anything negative. My wife has been the most supportive person that I could ever have asked for. When I go off on some harebrained tangent, she asks me, is that someplace you really want to go? And if I decide that it's where I want to go, then she supports it. And we haven't had too many wrong directions in our lives. So it's kind of nice having somebody that's you've been bonded to for that long a period of time. I really have been blessed. So I just thought that I would show you this little demonstration model that I had to help you understand, or help the people listening to this understand the difference in how the philosophy developed even way back 40 years ago. As I was telling you earlier, when I got out of dental school, because I was trying to explain to people how we were doing things different and saving tooth structure, I actually made this model. And it's it was an A1 acrylic and some denture acrylic, but what the objective was to show how much tooth structure was removed when you did a crown. And you were left with very little tooth structure when you did that crown preparation. And I was trying to explain to people that what I would prefer is in their mouth, I would prefer to do what's called an onlay. Okay? So that onlay is literally a piece that is much smaller than a crown, and it removes much less tooth structure in the process so that we can strengthen the cusps in the same way that we could with a crown, except once we started bonding, I could be able to bond these on or cement on the onlays and regain the strength of the tooth without taking and getting rid of significant amount of tooth structure, which to me, that tooth structure is sacred to the patient. When you have a crown preparation, you remove a significant amount of the tooth structure down to the gum tissue and even at times below the gum tissue. When you take a look at a cross section of a tooth and see where the nerve is at in the tooth and where the pulp horns go and how large the pulp chamber is, as you do a crown preparation, you're getting woefully close to the nerve inside the tooth. And consequently, the more we remove from the tooth, the greater the chances are that we're going to make that tooth become non-vital or go through a dying process. And so by taking the crown and reducing it down to an inlay, I mean, we reduce a significant amount of tooth structure to change that preparation into an onlay. So I think the better option that we have is doing the small little inlay that we're talking about here. And now this was 40 years ago. I was talking to patients about that.